Mayor Studebaker. Councilors Wendland,
Here.
Koha,
Here.
Mans. Here. O'Neill.
Here.
Lamont.
Here.
And Wynn.
Here.
Would you stand and join me in the flag salute, please? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our next item on the agenda is an executive session, so how will you?
The City Council will now meet in executive session under ORS 192.660 subsection 2D to conduct deliberations with persons who are designated to carry on labor negotiations. Designated staff will be allowed to attend the executive session. Under state law, representatives of the news media are not invited to this executive session because it does concern labor negotiations. No final decision will be made in the executive session. At the close of that session, the City Council will return to this room and will resume its open session.
No, we're going to the one, the new one in the back.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, we're back in session. Next, citizen comment. First, Mr. Robo Reynolds, is that correct?
Oh.
Which one of you is Robo? Nobody's going to admit it, okay.
We are the Robo Renegades, a Lake Oswego Elementary School First Lego League robotics team, also called FLO, is a global league of 4th through 8th grade team members that compete in 3 areas: innovation project, team building exercise called core values, and a robot game. The FLO core values are discovery, innovation, impact, inclusion, teamwork, and fun. The importance of core values is for us to work together as a team to solve problems while respecting each other.
Each year there is a theme and challenge, and this year's theme is City Shaper. The innovation project is based on the City Shaper theme. We are challenged to identify a problem with a building or public space in our community. Then we designed a solution to that problem. We then shared our solution with experts in our community, including a commercial real estate agent, an arborist, a Lake Oswego city planner, and a building engineer.
As part of the first LEGO League City Shaper Challenge, our team had to identify a problem in our community and a solution to solve that problem. Our team identified that the tree canopy in Lake Oswego is decreasing because more buildings are being built and covering a bigger percentage of their lot size. This problem leads to a number of negative impacts on the community. First, it makes Lake Oswego look more like a big city and causes it to lose its small town charm. Second, there are a number of environmental impacts. These include more carbon dioxide and less oxygen in the air. Also, it creates more stormwater runoff, which can lead to flooding, more fish dying, and higher costs to process wastewater.
We propose that Lake Oswego expand the building incentives for green roofs beyond Lake Grove to all of Lake Oswego. Similar to the building incentives in Lake Grove, we propose that Lake Oswego offer reduced sewer fees, lower building permits, and increased building square footage when a building incorporates a green roof construction or retrofit.
Green roofs help capture rainwater, prevent runoff, decrease populations released into rivers and streams, reduce wastewater treatment costs, and make city look beautiful. The experts we have interviewed believe that a green roof may pay back the construction cost in 30 years or less. Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
That was
We
great
appreciate
work.
it.
Thank you. You're the future Sustainability Advisory Board.
Do you come from all different schools?
Most of us come from Forest Hills Elementary, but we have one from Lake Grove.
Thank
Okay.
you. You did Forest Hills and Lake Grove proud. Thank you.
All right. Next is Dorothy Atwood.
Hello, thank you for serving our community. I really appreciate all the work you do. I'm here in support of the Sustainability and Climate Action Plan. I strongly encourage you to adopt it. The two things I'd like to add is that I'd love to see it accelerated. Everything we hear is that the problems are just getting worse, and it's a great plan. If we can accelerate it, that would be awesome. Secondly, I'd like to see you include a specific time for annual review of this plan. It would be ideal to do that during your strategic planning and prior to the budgetary process, and that's what I would love to see you do. You know, this plan could be potentially better by the addition or the subtraction of things. In my field of management systems, I always say, don't let perfection get in the way of progress. And please know that you can add or revise things at any time because it's a living plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Annie Miller,
Oh, questions?
thank you, though.
Okay.
Annie Miller?
Good afternoon. I'm Annie Miller. I've been a resident here for 46 years. I need the robo-rebels behind me because part of our plan from the Palisades neighborhood of the 2028 neighborhood plan talks about sustainability, wetlands, night skies, et cetera, et cetera. So if they're the future, we need to bridge that gap currently so that they have a future. So in our core plan that was for the 2028 core vision statement, Palisades is the largest geographical neighborhood as well as the largest in terms of population. Our character statement stated that since it was the largest geographical and populated area with the municipal golf course within its bounds, we need to protect the scenic parks, protected natural areas, open spaces, and Oswego Lake. The vision for the future was to promote the continuity of this character. We encourage awareness of environmental issues such as stormwater management, as they just stated, protection of wetlands, waterways, and critical natural habitat, all of which are in this Palisades Neighborhood Association and our neighborhood. Action steps were to promote environmental and social sustainability in the Palisades neighborhood, and that was at the forefront of the plan. So I urge the City Council to pull that out again because I know it's online. We spent 4 years drafting this, a committee of all the neighborhood, and we had many, many meetings. It's a historical neighborhood. We have a historical road called Stafford. It was a market road that brought trade into Lake Oswego, farm resources, et cetera. Not only is Rosemont and Stafford Road important as a market road, but it also had a transportation cause as well into Portland and beyond. We also want you to note again that the Pioneer Cemetery within our area is a historical landmark. The city's comprehensive plan policies call for the city to preserve and enhance historic resources through the identification, restoration, and protection of structures, sites, objects, and districts of cultural value within the city. I know the yellow light is on, but one of my friends said we waited, so I've got 2 more things to say. Promote and preserve the rich history of the Palisades area and educate the community. Ensure the preservation and maintenance of significant cultural and natural resources in the Palisades neighborhood. To protect open spaces and protect the rural Stafford Basin for its valued historic, rural, pastoral, and open feeling. Last but not least, I want you to remember that the municipal golf course is listed by zone as a park and natural area. So we as a neighborhood hope that you consider sensitive lands as they stated. It has several natural resources. They're mapped on the city's sensitive lands map. There is an overlay in Article 5016 that talks about this. It protects stream corridors and wetlands. My family and I have lived here forever. We hope that you take into consideration to keep the golf course a golf course and site a swimming pool someplace on school property. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy?
Go ahead, I dare you.
I'm sorry, would you tell me your last name?
Stromvig.
Thank you.
It's Norwegian. Okay. Thank you for having me. My name is Kathy Stromvig. I'm a 43-year Lake Oswego resident, currently at 17023 Crestview Drive in the Palisades neighborhood. I'm here representing a growing group of fellow residents dedicated to saving every square inch of the current golf course property for golf and opposed to locating the proposed aquatic recreation center project and any non-golf development on the current 40-acre Lake Oswego golf course property. To be clear, we are not opposed to a new pool or any other recreational assets per se, but we are adamantly opposed to this current aquatic center that not only prioritizes swimming and the other proposed activities over golf, but does so at the expense of our treasured Lake Oswego Golf Course. It's a sad history that our beloved Muni has never had the attention or consideration it deserves from city leaders. In 51 years, there have been only 2 significant investments in it: the driving range in the mid-'80s and the golf house in the early '90s. In the years since the golf course's inception, transformative approaches to golf course design and infrastructure systems have been developed, and new technologies have allowed for ever greater innovations in teaching techniques and equipment. At least some of these advances could have been applied along the way to resolve issues like drainage irrigation to maintain the health of the course and enhance the vibrancy and financial viability of the full facility. Instead, the Muni's wellness has been steadily eroded by leadership inattention or neglect, insistence on undue financial pressures that include significantly reduced course maintenance and repairs, a $100,000 a year water bill, and the gutting of the pro shop retail offerings. As course conditions worsen, leadership points to the golf course lack of profitability as the reason to diminish and dismiss it. Indeed, the very leadership that should be protecting it has been advocating its reduction by championing it as their preferred location, non-golf development. First, a year ago for a new Parks Home and Rec Center, and now for a new Parks Home Pool and Rec Center facility. Even under all this adversity, our Muni's losses are trending down from $350,000 in 2016 and 17 to under $200,000 in 2018 and 19, and rounds have stayed relatively flat at about $25,000 to $26,000 over the same 3-year period. At recent public meetings, I've heard some of you refer to golf as a sport on the decline. But according to the latest National Golf Foundation reports, quite the opposite is true here in the Northwest, where the number of rounds played rose by 5%, and especially in Portland, where rounds played increased by 10%. While some of you may consider golf a niche sport, it is more than holds its own when compared to other sports. Compare the 1 in 9 Americans playing golf with more mainstream spots. 1 in 13 Americans play basketball, and 1 in 17 played tennis, and 1 in 19 played baseball. Current trends at the Muni are these broader data points to us. We believe the possibilities to make the Muni a thriving and more financially viable golf facility are wide-ranging and feasible. From fixing the drainage, updating the irrigation, reconfiguring the greens, and strengthening maintenance regimes that improve the courses. One of the things that I think, I see my time, you're not going to get me. One of the things that I think you really should consider is to get an outside architect for the golf course to do a thing where they can really tell us what can be done, how much it would cost to really improve the golf course as a whole. Don't get somebody who just wants to come in and build up the golf course. But if we had an outside...
Okay, thank you. Where you?
Okay, and I'm going to give you this paper so that you know. And might I say, we've been waiting for an hour for you guys.
All right. Duke and Jan Castle.
Good afternoon. I'm Jan Castle. I live at 16181 Perelius Circle. I would like to cede my time to my husband, Duke Castle, who happily lives at the same address.
Good afternoon. I'm here to testify in support of the proposed city's Sustainability and Climate Action Plan. The plan is excellent. It covers all the right areas and has ambitious action suggestions. What I'm going to ask, though, is that you specifically address and discuss the issues that brought up the youth of Lake Oswego at the end of the plan. What they are saying is that the climate crisis has become a climate emergency, and we need to act like it's one. The proposed plan has a goal of being climate neutral by 2050. This goal is consistent with the UN's climate panel saying that we have to, if we're going to have any chance of keeping global warming to no more than a 1.5 degrees C increase, we need to cut greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050. Ambitious as that sounds, it isn't good enough. No one, including the IPCC, knows exactly how things play out. So to make a best guess, they develop scenarios based on various assumptions. The 2050 scenario is their mid-range guess, In other words, the probability of it occurring is only 50-50. I don't think we want to bet our kids' future on something like that. Not only are the odds discouraging, but especially when you consider that current climate models are predicting temperatures rising 30% faster than those models assumed. What the youth are asking for, and I want to quote this because it's in your plan, commit to reducing reliance on fossil fuels in municipal operations and reaching net zero by 2030. Although making this commitment doesn't guarantee we won't exceed the 1.5-degree target, it does specifically increase the odds. Can we do this? Yes, but it will take extraordinary effort without delay. When your house is burning, every day of delay causes you to lose that much more. We've already reached the point where we not only have to stop increasing greenhouse gases, but we will also need to start immediately sequestering carbon out of the atmosphere. So far, what these young people see is a lack of meaningful action on the scale and level of speed required. Lake Oswego is a community of intelligent, well-connected citizens who have the ability to both understand the critically serious nature of this crisis and who are in positions to demonstrate the degree of leadership that this issue requires. Members of our school community understand this. The Lake Ridge Middle School is already being built fossil fuel free, and all the other new schools that are built will meet that, and to the energy efficiency standards that this sustainability plan calls for. In addition, school administration is already discussing how to accelerate installation of the additional solar capability needed to make the school truly net zero energy. Furthermore, the administration has started the process of migrating to electric school buses by applying for a grant from PGE to purchase an electric school bus and by participating in an electric school bus ride and drive event at the end of this month. What I would ask of you is to request that staff come back and tell you what it would take for us to meet the youth goal of eliminating fossil fuel and achieving the net zero carbon emissions by 2030. Be prepared to hear that it will be extremely challenging, that it will depend on technological changes that are out of our control, and it will be expensive. There will be an element of truth in every one of those statements. Nature doesn't care. When your house is on fire, you do everything you possibly can to put it out as soon as possible. You also don't say you can't afford it. You do what you need to do and find a way to finance it. So as I said at the beginning, we have a good plan. The question I would ask now is, what is required to scale, accelerate, and finance this plan to address the reality of the crisis we're facing? If we're serious about this, we need to understand the depth of what is needed and then demonstrate to our community's youth that we will act at that level to give them the best chance for a decent future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Elizabeth Walsh.
I have it on my phone, which is about to die, so we'll see if this works. My name's Elizabeth Welsh, and I live on Rosalia Way in Lake Oswego, and I've lived there for about 15 years. So thank you all for all the work that you do every day. I know it's not an easy job always. I wasn't going to speak today, but I was hoping some students from Lake Oswego High School would make it, but I think they're caught in class or after-school activities, and as many of them have said, it shouldn't be up to them. I'm here today to support the City Sustainability and Climate Action Plan. I have just heard news from Salem that fossil fuel lobbyists have successfully delayed the Senate Climate Action Bill vote, and a hearing has been scheduled for a new climate bill on Thursday evening. While we can continue to fight for a bold climate action plan on the state level, we cannot rely on Salem to pass legislation to address the climate crisis. The City of Lake Oswego and you, City Councilors, must act bravely and boldly for change to address the climate crisis. We must all do our part. You have an obligation to support this plan. Yes, we should strive for carbon neutrality by 2030, but this is a good plan, and you should not put off support of this good plan. You should support the current Sustainability and Climate Action Plan. It needs to be in place today and acted upon. Thank you.
Thank you. Elia Feathers?
Ella.
I'm sorry. Elia to me.
Hello, my name is Ella Feathers, and I'm here to read a statement representing myself, Anna Marie Gunther, Benjamin Connor, and all Green Team members from Lake Ridge and Lake Oswego High Schools. We are all in support of the proposed City Sustainability and Climate Action Plan, and recognize the immense amounts of research and thought that went into outlining these ambitious and necessary plans for the future of Lake Oswego. On December 6, 2019, over 30 Lake Ridge and Lake Oswego High School students met with Councilors Lamott, Manns, Wynn, and Koloff to discuss our climate-related concerns. Since then, we have written a cover letter for the Sustainability and Climate Action Plan you are reviewing today. I recently handed somebody a new draft for all of you, so you should all have that right in front of you. And just to clarify, the way that we wrote that out is we literally went around to every single person and asked them what their top and most important issues were, and we reflected that directly in our cover letter. So, however, we have noticed hesitance regarding its inclusion in the Sustainability and Climate Action Plan. We greatly appreciate the ambition displayed in planning to be carbon neutral by 2050. However, we stand by the concerns we adamantly outlined in our cover letter. We must accomplish carbon neutrality and reduced reliance on fossil fuels by 2030 to follow the timeline outlined in the United Nations' most recent climate report. Though this may not seem feasible to you all today, it is imperative that we do not undermine the severity of the crisis we face. We have your eyes and ears, and now we want your action. Without it, we are making a conscious choice to stand by as the environment around us collapses. We will not and cannot let that happen. We have been told by the council to keep coming back in order to have our voices heard. So here I am, a high schooler coming back once again. I think it's my 4th time in this room in the past 3 or 4 months, asking you to please adopt this plan and to continue to champion sustainability-related efforts for the rest of your terms, and to include our cover letter in the plan. And as well, to continue to pass initiatives aimed at mitigating and ameliorating the climate crisis. The Sustainability and Climate Action Plan is an incredible start. However, please do not exclude our voices because we dare to dream of more. Thank you.
You. Okay, is John Surratt out in the hall? Does anybody know, or did he leave? Okay. That's fine. All right, that concludes citizen comment. Next item is a study session on the Sustainability and Climate Action Plan.
Buckle your seatbelts, everyone. This is a big item. We've been talking about this since council goal setting in 2017. But since then, we've only discussed it in this room once, and that was in 2018, in March 2018, when you all voted to approve the Climate Action Plan, as it was formerly called, to be incorporated into a revised Sustainability and Climate Action Plan, which is what you have in front of you now. Since the last time I was here, that original 6-page document has now become, I think, a 42-page document. There have been multiple phases of working with staff, working with PGE. We solicited comments from Metro and Clackamas County, although we didn't get any. SAB has spent a lot of time working on it. LOSN has spent a lot of time working on it. And we also had a consultant, ICLEI, that helped us a little bit, although we didn't really end up finding much value in what they provided to us. So those are the phases that we have gone through. Part of that process also included going back through our original Sustainability Action Plan for City Operations, which was last approved in 2014, and which by 2016 essentially had become obsolete. So that had basically provided the framework for my job and a lot of what we do here, and we either completed all of it or found that there were items that we just could not do, or items that just were no longer all that relevant to how we function as a city. So you'll notice that not everything in this plan has a greenhouse gas emissions reduction component to it. Some of them are just straight up boring sustainability actions that meet, economic, environmental, and social triple bottom line goals. But that is indicated in the plan. There's a little column that highlights that. We also put more of an equity lens on it as well, recognizing that it's often the most vulnerable populations that are most impacted by climate change. And Lake Oswego does have vulnerable populations here. And so there is also an indicator as to whether this meets some equity goals and reducing the impacts on those populations or providing services for them to help them adapt to climate change. We also do recognize, so one of the biggest changes between what you reviewed last time and what you're looking at now was the previous climate action plan didn't really address climate adaptation. We do recognize that climate change is happening, and yes, focusing on adaptation is not always that popular because it is saying, hey, this is happening and we just have to respond to it. So adaptation is how do we respond? And so that is a big section. That's the last section of this plan that we included. And as far as Lake Oswego is concerned, that mostly relates to wildfire smoke and flooding, and then issues with air quality as well. And that's where we chose to focus our efforts. So that is a whole new section and something that we haven't really looked at before. And our consultants did help us a little bit with that. And so those are the primary changes. I'm sure you have a lot of questions. I know some of you would like to go through it section by section. So I'm going to stop talking and just take my guidance from you and what you would like to hear from me.
Questions? Councilor Mans.
We incorporate the Parks Plan 2025 into this. We're now in 2020. This Parks Plan is how many years old now?
I think it was put together in 2012.
Okay.
I'm not totally sure.
It's quite a while ago. Not to delay this, but is there any consideration being given to look at the Parks Plan 2025 in conjunction, because we are citing it?
Yeah, we're citing that and a number of other plans as the existing policy framework that we're working within, so that we're hoping that this plan will be won't replace any of those, but will just work in tandem with them. Okay. So whenever they do review the Parks Plan 2025, our hope would be that they would consider the goals and actions in this plan as part of that review. And the same holds true for like the natural hazards mitigation plan and some of the others that are comprehensive plan and others that are mentioned in there.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilor Lamont.
I have a couple questions per section, so I'll go through a few and then open it back up and we can come back to those. But starting on page 6 and 7, one of the things I think we should add in there to our initiatives is the new City Hall project. The first thing about this that I really appreciated was how comprehensive this was, and we're putting all our sustainability stuff in one location instead of bits and pieces. Your references throughout are excellent, and I think it's time to get it all in one place, and this is it. So I just want to make sure that folks see that we worked hard on City Hall. It may not match Lake Ridge Middle, but there's going to be some sustainability features in there, including solar. Then when we get down to page 10, there was a 60% electric vehicles by 2040. That was a target that I think, if I got it right, and maybe a wording thing, and we can wordsmith later, not here tonight, but if it was the idea that we could help change behavior to get the city's residents to be 60% EV, we're not saying it, we're forcing it. We're trying to do as best we can through education, policies, promotions, and things. Is that correct? I just want clarification.
Right, yeah. I mean, we can't force people's consumer habits, but what we can do is help connect people with the resources they need. So, PGE is working on a program right now where they're helping residences to be EV ready when they're building new garages, things like some of the land use planning tools to have EV charging and parking garages and parking lots. And then, there are community events that this city itself isn't necessarily involved in, but like LOSN's event that they do, the EV car fair. So it's giving people the information, connecting them with the incentives they need. And that's why a lot of this plan, when you see who it's assigned to, we include other organizations like Fourth and PGE, and that we hope to build on some of those partnerships, recognizing that it's just me, and I can't do that on my own, but we can help to connect people to what all these other organizations have to
And
offer.
speaking of you, when I see the word sustainability, that means you, right?
Yes.
So I think we need to clarify that, because it's hard, I think, for folks outside to say, what does sustainability mean? It's our sustainability analyst or sustainability coordinator, whatever we get right for your title in there.
Mhm.
The next thing is on page 11, the EV number 1 goal, half of city fleet to be electric by 2030, excluding work pickup trucks, street sweepers, sanders, police cars, et cetera. I think that's a little light on the goal. I think, and not to get into the weeds today, but I think we need to beef that goal up. And I think we need to really look at the whole fleet being in EV. Well, the more and more we learn about semis and trucks and things,
Mhm.
then what can we do to beef that up? I'm just suggesting we should look at it as a group
Mhm.
and maybe increase that so it's half the city fleet, not just the non-police and fire. I mean, I'm seeing SUVs that are hybrids and plug-ins and electric now, semis that are getting electric, so.
Originally.
Are we discussing? I want to make sure we're going to go through it.
Well, you can ask questions.
I've
and
got
we can
questions
discuss
all the way
it.
through the book.
All right,
So-
go ahead and ask your
Yeah,
questions.
All right, so that's one I think we should look at. On page 11, when we talk about facilities for the city, I think we got to make sure that we include parks, because I think we could do a lot of EV stations at parks and parking lots and trails.
Again,
Well, when are we going to get response? I've
Well,
got questions.
first ask questions, and then we can make a discussion.
Well, let somebody else go. I'll come back as I've got questions along with ideas.
These aren't questions so far.
I've got 4 or 5 mixed in, but I thought we were
Does
having a
anybody
study
else-
session where we talk about stuff.
Well, we do, but first we're going to ask questions of staff while we're sitting at the table. Anybody else have questions? Councilor Kohoff.
This is a question for staff. A number of the people have made the point that we've got to keep going on this, that it's an organic document. If you are looking at your resources, the people who can help you and what we can bring, how often do you realistically think we could get back into this plan to get at even a number of the things that Councilor Lamont's bringing? And trust me, we could be at this all night. But what is your realistic assessment of how often we can get this back before the council to update it?
It would really just depend on the scope of that update, but I would say no more than every 2, maybe 3 years. Yeah, I mean, just the amount of time it takes to get staff to respond to questions.
So question 2, similarly, but not identical. So the Sustainability Advisory Committee is the board that you're looking to assist you in analyzing and amending and adding to this plan? That's what we have?
Yeah, I mean, they can to some degree. I mean, they provide advice, but as far as actually doing the written work, that's a little bit outside the scope of what they can do.
And lastly, the consultants that we hired that apparently dropped through the cracks, what was, in general terms, the problem with their approach?
The problem that I found was when I went back to check the references and resources that they used, some of them I couldn't track down. So I didn't know where they were coming up with their greenhouse gas emission estimates. Some of them, as far as the adaptation document they put together, I felt like was done by a Google search. And so when SAB, when they came and presented virtually to SAB, their feedback was, we could have found this online. And so some of what I felt like they were recommending, so for example, they put together a list of tree species that are climate adaptive to Lake Oswego based on projections that 60 years from now our climate will be similar to Sacramento. And then when we reviewed those species with our arborists and with parks, they were like, those trees will never survive here. And when I tracked down the resource, it came from a U.S. Forest Service wildfire website from California. It has nothing to do with Lake Oswego, even taking those projections into account. So, you know, it's would have been, having been to grad school twice, felt uncomfortable putting numbers in where I couldn't track down the correct data source. Okay. And so that's why I just kind of threw the data out.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Amen.
Councilor Nguyen.
Thank you, Jenny, for your very thorough presentation here, and I think that some things I recognize that has been a long process and has been started more than 3 years ago. So thank you for that. My questions are related to I know that this is a living document, and as one of the citizens had pointed out, that we shouldn't try to pursue perfection, and you know, the over-analysis leading to that argument. So I'm for adopting it, the plan, but what I'd like to see is, can we build into this plan something that's more a frequent review, more than just every 2 or 3 years, but something that we can do on an annual basis? And I often tell people at meeting, you know, on an annual basis, can we identify some of the low-hanging fruit, things that we can do immediately? We can't re-engineer the entire plan every year, but maybe there's sections that we can identify that we can actually achieve. And as we know more and as technology changes, I think that, as Councilor Lamonda pointed out, 2030 is kind of far out there for EV vehicles, but quite frankly, the Toyota Priuses we have right now aren't going to last us until then. So I think that there's going to be an opportunity when those vehicles need to be replaced within probably the next couple, 3 years. Maybe that's a good an opportunity for us to be able to revise that. So can we build into the plan, or build in some mechanism that we have a more frequent review of where we're at, and how maybe if we're looking at if the technology allows us to be able to achieve some of these goals faster, we should adjust them accordingly.
Yeah, I think doing an annual update is definitely a feasible goal. I don't think we can rewrite this every year, but I think that, you know, presenting council every year about what we've been able to achieve or what we're starting to achieve. I know with the sustainability plan before I started here it looked like, just looking through the notes, that was being done. And so some of the goals on here that I gave a very short timeline to, I think, you know, that's sort of what I identified as the lowest hanging fruit in terms of not just the technology and everything is already out there, but in terms of what I think staff are ready and able and comfortable to start doing. The EV one is a good example. The original goal was to replace our entire fleet by 2030, but after getting some department head comment, they only wanted that to be 10 vehicles. And so I said, let's make it half. But, you know, as you're saying, this is changing so fast that I feel like we can meet this goal pretty easily without trying too hard.
So it should change for another draft that we can up that goal to make it quicker.
So you want to look at that, sorry, I turned myself off. You want to look at the fleet itself, because I think the problem is, some of the pieces of equipment you have in the fleet are ones that have a multi-decade lifespan. Right. And so I'm not sure that we could actually hit a goal that's higher than half. Half seems very ambitious to me. But fire engines, for example, we have them for 25 years. And so you have to amortize them. You may not, what I'm trying to say is you may not actually have the resources.
But police cars and pickup trucks should be in that percentage. It says they're excluded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's
I think the police department is looking at options to get more environmentally friendly vehicles without committing to having them be electric, if that makes any sense at all.
Councilor Wendland.
Maybe the Cybertruck will be on the market.
That's right.
So let's wait till then.
Councilor Wendland.
That's all for you, sir?
Cybertruck.
Cybertrucks. So just so I'm clear, the sustainability group, when all this was put together, we have consensus building about what's in the report. Is that correct? So obviously there's people, there's still people that don't believe that there's any, global warming, and other people feel like there won't be Earth in 12 years and everything in between. Do you think that we're at a point to where we've reached consensus with the different groups that when the high schoolers come in and say, let's do everything by 2030, I would love to do that if we had the resources, but do you feel that within the group, the targets that you have on page 8 by 2035, 45, and 2050, different things are pretty achievable, and you feel like these are realistic goals that you reached a consensus on?
Yeah, so the goals that are in there, to be honest, we took from Milwaukee's climate action plan, and they're the same ones that will be in Beaverton's and Hillsborough. So as a region, we kind of decided that we would go with what the UN suggestions were. Obviously, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, Milwaukee cut theirs in half, and their wonderful climate action coordinator, I think her hair is on fire right now trying to figure out how to do it. And I don't want to necessarily be in that same position. While I absolutely agree with everything the high school students are saying,
Right, I do too. Yeah.
and I wish, I would love this to be a very strict and ambitious plan, but I don't feel like I have enough support to do that. And I would rather us get going and start working and start meeting these goals than continuing to spend month after month and year after year revising this over and over and over again to get something that's more ambitious. I feel like we need to start doing something. And so, yes, I do feel like the targets that are in there are definitely achievable with what we have, but we're not going to achieve them if we don't start working on it.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Lamont,
Okay, can we,
you can ask questions.
back to what Councilor Wendland was saying on the blue bar there. Again, you did a comprehensive approach. You've pulled out things that we've accomplished. I think a lot of folks don't know that we've accomplished a lot of things. And that there's ambitious actions under most of the goals for us to work on as a municipality, not state or feds. So the question is, if we went to 2030 and you were asked to go back and say, what would it take for us?
Sorry, for which one?
Well, on page 8, as Councilor Wendland said, the 4 goals, or 3
Okay,
goals.
which
2030.
target are you talking about for 2030, though?
Well, carbon neutrality by 2030.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So knowing a lot of this is in your head, having gone through all this, and you said, here, we can do this, we can do that, we can do that. We haven't voted on any of this yet, but there's all kinds of really great actions to do. How much would our actions change if we moved it up to 2030? Move the goal up? Obviously, the note I brought up about only 50% of half the city fleet would have to be increased to get to 2030. Is that correct?
I feel like part of the difficulty in answering that question is that we haven't done a recent greenhouse gas inventory, so we don't know where we're starting from. Clackamas County will be completing a greenhouse gas inventory on our behalf within the next 18 months, I believe. But when you're looking at each one of these categories, building, transportation, buildings, there are some very obvious, if you start building to net zero or carbon zero, great, and that's something we know PGE and Northwest Natural are willing to work with us on. Transportation, again, that's EVs and public transit. Manufacturing and disposal of products is where, when you start getting into the consumption side and those scope 3 emissions, it starts getting complicated very fast.
For how much we can control at
For
the
how much
local
we can
level.
control.
Right.
Within our own city supply chain, sure. We could definitely dig deeper into that and find out what our emissions look like, but consumption-based inventories are very complicated. Portland's trying to figure it out and having a pretty hard time with it. So we would really need to dedicate some good resources to continually measuring and reporting on those emissions and what our progress is to know if we were actually getting there. So
Councilor Wynn, I think, and either Councilor Kohoff or Mans brought up the idea of regular updates. I think there was so much information here as far as educating all of us, and you pushed education as a big thing, that I can see a regular update, and also things like the water assessment you can have done by our staff, things that people don't know about, a constant kind of flow of information, but all in one spot, not a piece here at the library and a piece there. What if this was adopted with some tweaks and things that we might have, and then in 18 months or 2 years, county comes back and says, here's what we've got for you for greenhouse gases, and then we could adjust from there to adjust these actions, because I'm just trying to get my mind wrapped on what we as a city could do to get us to 2030. What other things will we need to do, knowing we only control so many cars and trucks, so many streets, so many EVs. And again, you haven't missed much. I mean, it's pretty comprehensive. So is that an idea?
yeah, and I'm definitely, I mean, part of me wanted to wait until Clackamas County finished their own climate action plan with the greenhouse gas inventory, because I feel like that's the tool that we really need, not just from a measuring perspective, but from that regional approach, because so much in here is going to be very difficult for us as a small city to do without collaboration with the county and Metro and TriMet, and I feel like we need to work as a region on these issues. And so, yes, after that inventory is done, I think that we'll have a lot more information to work with.
As an option.
Councilor O'Neill.
I think the plan is great. I think we should get the plan approved and get this plan moving. This reminds me of the same discussion we had, what was it, 6-7 years ago, when we were talking about LED lights, and people on the council were saying, we need more information. And it was the better choice to go now, not wait, and think about how much money we saved and what a great thing that was. I just look at this as a living document. We'll be changing this document because technology in this field, so much brain power is going to this field of improving the environment, that when, you know, the technology's out, boom, we're changing our plan. And if that makes our plan go from 2050 to 2025, then I don't think anyone's going to reject that. So I'm for, let's get this thing approved and let's get moving. Because I don't feel any restrictions. We can't change things as technology comes out.
Right.
Well, good. Yeah. Should we start the discussion then?
Yeah, that's fine. And no, just let me ask, is there any more questions? All right. Now, this is a study session, so we're not going to take any votes. This is just a study session. Okay. Discussion. Councilor Kohlhoff.
So this was a very great start. I especially appreciated the hard work of the volunteers who cared and invested their time. I liked how various issues intertwine with other documents and plans, which would need coordination. The Virgo in me really liked that. And I saw real value in assigning departments of the city to the various initiatives. I am very reluctant to say go ahead this very minute, because I, and it sounds like Councilor Mott and some of us, really want more. We sat there, and for the first time I actually felt a little despair. Because I'm one of those that do believe that we're in a crisis. I pointed out that even in the short time from when you wrote this, I'm assuming you wrote it or you supervised the writing, that we had already gone up in parts per million. 6 weeks. I also am disturbed that we're not measuring our impact, but given what you've just said, because to me that's just duh. I mean, how do we know? And our benchmarks have been lined out. They're very aggressive and relentless. We're going to be cooked figuratively and literally. So the long and short of what I want to do is to definitely see that this does not grow dust, that we, as you, Councilor O'Neill said, and I believe this is true, this is so rapid moving, both to the bad and to the possibilities of finding out what can be done, that I'm okay with that. You have been very kind and gave me a stack of papers so that I can get caught up on what the various people had to say. And finally, I would say that one of the early, and I mean early, not later, of course, pay attention to what Clackamas County comes out with and maybe align ourselves more and more with them. And then also, I'm aware that Metro's 2015 climate smart strategy is going to, and I didn't see that in what we've done so far, how we align. And we don't want to sound like money mongers, but sounding like money mongers, if they're going to be, giving grants and other financial assets to us, then we do need to be aligned with them. So everyone has kind of talked me into agreeing if we need to, but only, and you understanding that we're really going to assist and get this over the line. We're not leaving this to die. The last thing I'd say is, we're always talking about low-lying fruit. And I'm a gardener, but this fruit has fallen off of the tree long ago and gone to compost, so no.
Councilor Lamont.
All right, so I'll hit some of the points that I think we should just either discuss or put in there and then come back with some language. So from page 11, add the parks in, make sure parks are considered, not just the buildings. Also in the EV3, the incentives for developers to put in EV stations. I think we should look at the lead requirements for like recycling. I know that you've got an issue with planning commissions working on as far as getting recycling facilities inside our multifamily. I think that's critical, and they have a lot of standards, so I think we can probably pick up EV standards from them. I also think that we should broaden into our educational approach large landowners, not only schools and churches. I went to the interfaith group or the interfaith discussion the other day with LOSN, and churches are looking at solar on the roof as well as parking lots. I think Shorenstein has tons of parking lots that are exposed to solar. Some are full of trees, that we can do some really cool stuff on those lots to get power into the buildings and power into the city. On page 12, one of the biggest things when you were talking about transit, push for better bus shelters. Push for possible new park and ride. This morning at the Downtown Business Committee, we found that not many people are using the park and ride at Christ Church. We need to look at that again. New transit options, and one thing was missing is us lobbying and working with our TriMet partner to get the new routes funded. The plan from 5 years ago, it's been 5 years since that has been out, shows how they can revitalize and revamp our bus routes, and we can take people off the street. So I think we need to make sure that's one of our initiatives that we are going to get with TriMet sooner than later to get the bus plan going. In the report, which we can flesh out later, you mentioned Frog Ferry. I think most of the public doesn't understand that. You want to explain that that's a potential water taxi along the river. You mentioned Portland to here, but there's a lot of discussion of Milwaukee, Portland, Oak Grove, West Lynn, and Oregon City being linked with some sort of a water taxi, and not just for fun on Saturdays, but an actual water taxi. TR4, the transit, where you talked about Councilor Mann's my favorite subject is safe routes to schools. I think that might want to jump into the bicycle trail. It wasn't quite transit in my mind. It's just whether it's a or a B, so to speak. And then in there you said, what is walking school bus days? I think I know what you meant. I think we just need to clarify the sentence. Is that where we work with the bus company and not have the kids picked up by the bus and we walk to school, or what does that mean?
So parents organize essentially a walking
Day.
school bus.
Yeah, okay. It was inartfully worded, but I love the idea. So maybe that whole thing gets put in bicycles once you get looking at it, because it just stuck out as a transit thing. The page 17, goal by 2021 needs some clarification. That, I think, was typos in there, so I was unclear. On page 17, let's make sure we get there real quick before I do that. I think that the timing was off. Work with businesses, LOSD, et cetera, for the city's megawatt goal by 2021, which is next year. We're not going to meet it. And the timeline was 3 years. So I think we just got to, unless you're meaning something different than I.
No, we have a resolution
Already from the council
already
from way
from the
back.
council to do this by 2021, but I don't think we're going to meet it.
So if we need to revise that as a council, then we should put the right goal. What if you think it's 2025, just so this is new information for us to follow as guidelines and policies, okay? Page 18, and I'm using the pages to get my stuff out here. EV1, or EN1. Wait, where was that to explain EN4? Hold on. Oh, the EUI of 22 for net zero. You may want to explain EUI in there to people again, just for our citizens to understand that. And then the last couple things on page 24, can you clarify if the state has a gray water policy? We can do gray water in the state of Oregon, I think.
They do have a gray water policy.
Yeah, so that's in effect. So if we could move the gray water idea forward, especially since we're getting drier and drier, that would be a great idea if the state's already teed it up. Some states don't allow it, which is wrong. Page 27, and I'll type up these notes for you for later. 27, so NR 4, natural resources 4, high water quality, I think we need to add public works in there. And the question I have is something we raised in a forum with staff, like on West Bay, we've got the concrete rain gardens that are supposed to be collecting off the street. They're in the public right of way. But when you go there, they were all compacted dirt and mud. There's no plants life left anymore. It's on our side. So I think it's not only construction of new, I think we should have the policy of making sure we up in our game in maintenance however we can with staffing and funding. But if we have those in our right of way, we should maintain them so they are draining properly. I went through 5 of them and they were all compacted and they weren't draining and they were mud instead of plants. So maintenance would be the issue there. Page 34, and I'm almost done.
You said that already.
I'm getting close, study session. 33, 34, okay. The public education we talked about, I think the ongoing, where people really learn about all our sustainability stuff in one location, once a year, whatever you think would work, and then we can do updates on the plan as well. I think that would be fantastic, instead of hunting and pecking for stuff. Page 38. This is a question that I think needs further research by our staff and maybe the fire department. But when we did the Iron Mountain Park Master Plan, one of the concerns of the community and the fire department was a forest fire along the embankment of Iron Mountain. And so we had that forum a couple years ago with the Oregon State professor from the forestry department. And he said, whether it's in your backyard or a national forest, you got to thin trees out eventually because they're choking each other. So it's something we should look at on our land holdings. The county's doing it. But whether it's Cooks Butte, Iron Mountain, should we be looking at that because of forest fire potential? Should we be thinning in the proper way? And page 40, when we get into the solar potential, the one thing that keeps coming up in the reading I'm doing is that you can have solar on your house or in your parking lot or in your community, but if everything goes out, you're not going to have anything to use to kind of sustain yourself for 3 days, a week, or whatever, and you're really getting into that adaptability, which I thought was great. So I think we need to address something about battery, that schools or city facilities and homes should have some sort of backup so they can live on the solar until things pick back up. That's it.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Wendland.
Well, I only have about 102 things, so I'll do them
You
very
go, brother.
quick. No. First of all, thanks for the report. These are comments, so my big comments, there's 3 of them. One, we have to get started. I support getting something going. I believe that this is pretty comprehensive. A lot of it is fluid. I understand all that, but at least it gets things in the queue. My concern is there's a lot of issues, and I won't go through them, or a lot of points on here that are going to cost money. And I think that's always the disconnect between the philosophical and the aspirational plans, and then where it actually gets into the meat and potatoes of how are you going to fund some of these things. So, and I can go through this later with you, but, you know, from the staff standpoint, I guess to identify things where we do need money, and then we're going to have to make decisions of funding this versus something else. Because unfortunately, there aren't any revenue sources for sustainability that are coming additional money. So I think to support this, we're going to have to actually have us meet the criteria in funding and budgeting these items, or at least give a realistic answer to say, we agree with this, but we can't fund it. So people are not coming back to us and say, well, hey, you agreed to the plan, why haven't you done X, Y, and Z? And if we say we don't have money, it needs to be a legitimate concern. Then the last part is I love the partnerships in the education part, and I know that we had a very successful 10 years ago relationship with the school district of educating kids about lake water and the watershed and all kinds of stuff. And I think you've got 7,000 students in the district that are going to be on your side. And the best part of, to me, creating momentum is to start figuring out ways that we can utilize that group and educate them. When I went through the district here, we talked about recycling, and Ken Becker, who is a science teacher, taught us about recycling. And we had paper drives, and we had cans and bottles and everything else. And from that moment in time, I've always been a huge supporter of recycling. It's the same thing with most of your action points on here. Kids can influence the next car that parents are going to buy. Let's buy an electric one. I mean, it's amazing what they can do. And so I would encourage the sustainability group, the high school group especially, to figure out in this plan what are things that they could deal at a local level to change things. I'm less concerned about the national level because that's a thing that people can do whatever they want to on their own. But in a local area, what are some steps that we can take that will make a difference? When they have a scout project that puts the little duck thing that don't pour anything down the drains, it's very effective. You see every drain, and those are things that, to me, were concrete items, concrete steps that they can do instead of just talking theoretical things. So I'm excited that we get moving on this, and thank you for all your work. I know it's a work in process, but thanks for bringing it all together.
Councilor Mans.
Councilor Wendland, do you compost?
You mean with food?
He
No,
doesn't have food waste at his house.
I do not. I don't
Sorry.
have any
Sorry.
wasted food. We go out all
Sorry.
the time. We're empty nesters.
But you're into it. That
They
was
eat
my
everything.
question. Okay, let me continue before the mayor gives me the side eye here.
No, I'm fine.
I know.
I'll get the hook out here. Just
I know.
get to it.
I think that inaction is the worst thing that we can do. Therefore, I support moving ahead with this living document. I think it's well-written. I think it is a fluid document. We are going to see technological changes. We are going to fine-tune things as we go along. It's a plan. It's not Moses writing on the stone. So I would encourage us to move forward with the plan as it's written, get something going, and show people that we are ready to work and act on the plan.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Wynn.
I just want to say that, I think that with the youth, I think that I've been thinking a lot about this. And I think as I sit on the dais here, and with all due respect, I think that some of these changes that are going to be happening in the next 10, 20, 30 years, I'll probably still want to, I hope that all of you are still with me in the next 30 years, but the reality is.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
I hope we all live to 100. But in all honesty, I think that, this plan, I'm fully supportive of adopting the plan, but I look at the goals in here not as really goals. I think that should be on the floor. That should be the bare minimum that we should be aspiring to. Because I think that if we're satisfied with achieving some of these things out in 2030, 2035, if we get there and we get ourselves a pat on the back, hey, it takes 35 years to get there, that should be not, we should not be satisfied with that. That said, I think that, we as leaders of the community, I think we need to actually start sounding the alarm. Because I think that the urgency is not being communicated properly. I think about some of the things that we, over the past few decades, I haven't been around as many decades as some of the others on this council and this community. However, I'll say this, is that when I was growing up, my dad was a smoker, as was many of my uncles and some of my aunts. And my dad had said, why should I stop smoking? There's no guarantee that I'll live any longer if I stop smoking. He's right, because he'll point to my aunt that smoked into her 90s, and she died a peaceful life. And I know there's nothing to prove that things that we're doing right now, our actions doing right now, will affect, change the whole course of climate change. But I will say this: growing up in a household where secondhand smoke was something that we dealt with, by him stopping smoking created an impact on our everyday lives in the here and now. And I think that we as leaders often need to recognize is that, we can set these aspirational goals and say, here's a plan, this is how we're going to solve it. But I think we've got to do a little bit more. And I think that along with this plan, we've also got to really create that sense of urgency. As you said, you've got 7,000 students that are on board that will help us get these goals. But again, I think we need to go a little bit farther. I think that certainly adopting this plan is a step in the right direction. But I think along with that, we've got to communicate somehow that this is much more than just another problem we're solving, more than just potholes and making sure that we get enough electric vehicles on the road. But I think that the things that we're doing right now, I think, are going to really change the trajectory, because I think we're on, there will be, again, there's going to be people that will deny it. And unfortunately, a lot of those deniers will probably never live to see the impacts. But I hope that towards the end of my life, and then certainly the lives of my kids and the next generations, we'll see the things that we've done. And if we see the writing on the wall, it may not make us live any longer. Just like my dad, he's probably going to still die at the same age he did. But in the meantime, I can say that, we didn't have to deal with the secondhand smoke and those kind of things. So in my analogy, I'm not going to use the low-hanging fruit analogy anymore. So I will say, maybe I'll use the smoking analogy, because back in the 60s and 70s, I remember my mom had said, when you were born, the doctor came in with a cigarette in his mouth and putting on all the garb, and that was normal, and that was accepted. But I think now, knowing what we know now, we've got to act.
Look what happened, you're on city council.
But maybe if your aunt died when she was 90 smoking all the time, maybe I should take up smoking.
I should show you a picture. She actually, on my wife's side too, we went to Vietnam a year and a half ago. She smoked not just normal tobacco, she was smoking the tobacco leaf. Like, she had a cigarette this big. I've got a picture I can show you after council. But hey, that could be an argument that, hey, but what I'm saying is that, she could be denying that tobacco decreases her life, and in her case it didn't. But I think that we as a community need to look at the urgency of the issue.
Councilor Kohlhoff.
Well, I would just add that what Councilor Wen is saying is that we, as a council, have to prioritize this, and it may well be that some other things don't get funded, and the things that put us on the safer side, the climate issue, we spend it there. That it will take a reorganization. You talked about the lady at Milwaukee. She's a full-time employee. That's why they're making a lot of progress.
Councilor Lamont.
So my final question, knowing we have a climate urgency and a climate emergency, when do you want to bring this back to us in form to be approved?
I guess it could be the next city council meeting, but again, it depends on the scope of changes.
So the changes that y'all have suggested so far are relatively minor in
Minor.
nature.
Right, little. I think we're in agreement.
So I think we could bring it back as quickly as Jenny can turn those small changes around. I haven't heard anybody say, take this whole section out, or.
No.
I'd like to wait till April, if you will, when I'm back and
Can totally wait until all 7 of you are present.
all right, that'd be great.
So we're that close. If
Oh,
some tweaks
yeah,
and cleanups,
I mean,
and we're
it's
done.
really
Yeah.
just adding in appendices and making those minor changes that shouldn't take too much time.
Time to move.
Thank you. Good job.
Well done.
Yes.
Okay, then,
Do you need us to give like official direction to bring this back to us?
Well, can I ask or just add one thing? There's a lot of information in here, and if you're not a city councilor that has to go through 50 pages at a time, is it possible to get maybe some of the action parts in a more summarized fashion of the 1, 2, and like the 1 and 2 year and the
Yeah.
kind of some.
So what will this result in terms of a work plan for the next couple of
Right,
years?
right,
To
exactly.
adopt it? Yes, we can
Something
do
like that. That'd be perfect. Thanks.
again, thank you. Okay, the next item is consent agenda. Sorry?
So Mayor, if I could
Yes,
make a
ma'am.
suggestion, we had a request to have the February 4th meeting minutes removed for further review. So if you were to adopt the entire consent agenda this evening, it would be everything except for the February 4th, 2020 meeting minutes, which would come back to you
Okay, but I
at your
think,
next meeting.
I think Councilor Kohlhoff has something.
No,
Okay.
I made a mistake. 7.1 is part of the consent agenda.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to adopt the consent agenda except for the February 4, 2020 minutes.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay. Then information from council. Anybody
we have
anything
8.1.
They want to dazzle us with?
We have 8.1.
8.1, I'm sorry, that's a resolution of the city councilors to approve an appointment to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force.
Move to adopt resolution 20.05.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, now it's time, if anybody wants to dazzle us with information, this is the time to do it.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Lamont.
Quickly, tomorrow, the Chamber of Commerce is having a lunch and learn on the Mount Hood territory. One of their senior administrators is coming over to talk about digital marketing of cities, counties, and states to get our word out. So that's at noon. You bring your own lunch. It's lunch and learn by the Chamber.
Anybody else? Councilor Mance, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Quickly, Councilor Lamont and I were at Representative Schrader's roundtable today, where we heard from many, many different municipalities. If anyone would like additional information on what's going on in different cities, let me know. I'm sorry I didn't have time to prepare it.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. In that case, this meeting is adjourned, and this will conclude the broadcast portion of the meeting as we now go into executive session.
City Council will now be going to executive session under